quickly to introduce myself. I'll be a host if technology allows me for the rest of this hour. We do have Ruchi and Juhi with us. What I was saying earlier is that we're going to look at this specific discussion from two angles or two dimensions. Ruchi will give us inside out view for students at MICA, and we will get Juhi to come in and give us her perspective on outside in view. What does this transition look like when you move from a very safe environment of a B school and transition into, what can be very unpredictable real world? I would like to introduce myself as well. My name is Nilesh Kharva. I'm originally a Bombay boy, now based in Sydney, and my background is in learning and development. I'm very passionate about human skills development. So when we speak about human skills, we're talking about those soft skills and power skills that I have done for about 2 decades now. And passion specifically around well-being and well-being through knowledge and knowledge that helps us get better results in life, in whether it's work-wise or personal life-wise. With that, the question that I had for Juhi and you is, in real world, when you explain what you really do, we can end up using a lot of jargon. So think you're explaining yourself to a 15-year-old schoolgirl, high school child who turns around and says, like, what do you really do? And you have 90 seconds to do so. So if we can clock you, Ruchi, do you want to have a go so that I get to hear what you do? You need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. So sorry. So yes, here's what I do. So the one thing that I do is I get to interact with a large group of people across different ages, ranging from 21, 22, who've just got onto the real world, to the real senior people who've seen life and want to get back to understand what they've done. And my core job is to talk to people, share experiences through which and through reflections, therefore, help us become better versions of ourselves. To quote unquote, it's called teaching, but basically I facilitate the whole process of knowing yourself better.
Perfect. If I could take that back to you, Juhi, you have 90 seconds to explain a 15-year-old, what do you really do?
So I try to bring joy as the center of everybody's life, right? How do we do that? I'm a two-time social entrepreneur. I've built 2 organizations, one Light Up, which is a non-for-profit, and Unbottle Emotions, a community initiative. The center of both our work has been around democratizing access to mental health resources and build capacity of young individuals and professionals and drive public engagement. The idea has always been around destigmatizing mental health, building safe spaces in communities, and most importantly, equipping youth, young children, and students with skills to navigate the real life, right? Build resilience, regulate emotions, right? So, this is what I do. I hope I've been able to finish it in 90 seconds.
Both of you are doing really good on this challenge. We don't need to really watch ourselves. We can have a very free-flowing conversation here on. So if I were to throw it back to you, Juhi, what is one piece of advice you would give someone who's just starting out and is exploring the world and opportunities? And, world can be very demanding right now. So challenges specifically around maintaining a balance in life. So what would be that one piece of advice you would give anyone?
So I was thinking and reflecting, from my own journey while, I was preparing that how do I go about answering. So I also took a reflection on my own journey and, my own peer circles. And I would like to talk about 3 key things. One being that comparison is a joy stealer. Right. So it's so important to actually deeply understand of who we are as people, what skills we can offer to professional spaces, what kind of strengths do we have, and what are some of our work in progress areas also. But in this journey, it's so important to develop that, ride the tide with the highs and lows, right? But continue focusing on our own selves. Like I also have a very, very niche offering. I studied management and fashion, and I'm doing completely something different. But throughout my own journey, I think I made sure that what's the purpose that I want to kind of create, what's the value I want to give back, what the kind of money also I want to make, right? So some of these things I think are key while building your own career in this long marathon, not a sprint. So yeah,
Good. Amazing. Love that one key takeaway I got from yours is comparison is a thief of joy. So
definitely.
focus on yourself. Don't compare yourself with anyone else, which is a very good piece of advice as a starting point. If I could go back to Ruchi, reflecting on your introduction, how do you think academic environments like MICA shape conversations around well-being in general?
Okay. So, Nilesh, I'll just take the privilege of expanding this a little and I'll use MICA as a point in case, but
Sure.
there are other schools also to which this could completely apply. So, there are two things. Number one is that you are with your peers, and borrowing in from what Juhi said, you could use this as only for comparison and therefore be constantly unhappy or counting on what you've missed out. But parallelly, it's also the space where you have only your peers around, and therefore you can create your greatest support system. The only one little bit that I feel the youngsters do, and I'm especially talking of the ones in B school, please don't believe that you're the center of the world for others. Be the center of the world for your own self.
Yeah.
Very often you become very harsh on yourself, believing everybody's watching you. Believe me, everybody has their own battles to fight. And so that's what I keep telling the youngsters who come in also, because they carry huge weights of judgment on themselves, which they believe others believe about them, but every other is holding the same thought. So it's very, very important to just shift the limelight to yourself to understand who and what I am, not who and what others think I am, and who or what others want me to be. So I feel that's really, really important. Majority of the times, the student who stood like sixth in a class of 60 is a lot more unhappy than the one who stood 32nd in a class of 60. Because the one who's sixth believes that all the others are watching them, but the one who's 32nd believes I was about to be 40th and I could make it to 32nd, so I think I can get better. So if you're measuring this on happiness, ironically, the one on 32nd is happier than the one on 6th, is less stressed than the one on 6th, and therefore is enjoying the journey more. It's a very short journey, huge stressors. So the idea is that reflect and going again, borrowing from what Juhi mentioned, it's important to take time off and say, well, this is what's happened. How important and relevant is it in this marathon that I'm out there, which I want to be a part of and not drop off? So that's that little bit that I feel I constantly get back. And Nilesh, just one more bit. With every coming batch, that's the next generation coming in, I feel it's only getting harder. So the conversation that we are having today is even more pertinent.
It's very well put. I guess the moment you said that, the comparison never really ends. I'm going to ask you this question. As in your experience, have you seen where someone who's come first or second and still feel very critical about their performance and say, like, I could have done better than this? You have. I'm sure it's a very universal thing because the way we have been taught to compete is by comparison. Sometimes that comparison begins with ourselves, right? I want to do better than what I did in my practice sessions, or I want to do better by getting a better job compared to my peers. I want to make more money. So it doesn't matter that I'm making enough money to look after myself and my family. I need to make more than my peer. Only then I'm successful. So that definition of success changes, right? Um, I love that you brought these themes up. And what I wanted to ask specifically, Ruchi, here now is that life at MICA, or an atmosphere as supportive as MICA, which is say a B school environment, is often seen as a microcosm of creativity and
Yeah.
community. So, if I were to look at the avenues through which people can access these different networks, which influence student life experiences in MICA, what makes MICA's environment so unique beyond these access points or with these access points?
Okay, so let me start with the simpler one with these access points. And as I speak that, I'm also speaking for a lot of other B schools, which are like may not be the top rank B schools, but almost all average and above average B schools. They all provide the following. So, for example, a library, a cultural unit, which could be an amphitheater. There are small canteens and mess areas, spaces right outside the classrooms. I think they're like the most beautiful spaces of complete conflicted emotion, where one who's been able to get the answer absolutely right is standing unhappy, and the one who just managed to understand it is still feeling very proud of the fact that I could respond. Those spaces, very often auditoriums, in so many instances, the corridors of the faculties are known to be the most stressful areas. But majority of the times, and this is my experience as I watch it in MICA and the other places that I worked, a faculty who walks past you is always going to smile at you and ask you, how are you doing? But that's seen as a test and not a support is what gets me to the second part of the question. What's not there apart from the formal systems provided? So, the formal system, you will have a counselor you will never want to go to, you will have a senior you will never want to talk to, you will have this batchmate who's willing to support you, but you're not willing to share enough because you're looking at that person not as a collaborator but as a competitor. Everything that I say is at two ends. You can turn the same competitor a collaborator. You can turn the same it's sometimes you will really find it so ironical that there are 10 students in a mess or a canteen where they're supposed to socialize, but majority of the time they're all busy in their phones, so they're just physically together but actually disconnected. And those are things that become glaring, because that's when you miss sight of those multiple opportunities that you have to interact and create a network of support, because you are isolating yourself by getting caught into this. And I'm not blaming technology or social media, I'm saying this is how it is. Who got it, who started, and who's got to stop it, I don't know. But I'm just giving you observations as I notice. And sometimes, Nilesh, it is so sad that in class you can watch a student who's mentally just zoned out. And the first instance is the moment the class gets over, he or she wants to leave. As a faculty, I'm telling you, your heart pours out because you want to walk behind that student, place your hand and say, is everything okay? But then that student is not providing access to you.
And you have to respect their space. So, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
I can see the dilemma there, right? You want to reach out and help, but sometimes you let people struggle so that they can then figure out how to regulate their feelings, reach out, do what you need to do, right? And very well put question over there is like, your connections are forged. They're not never really imposed. So if you are given an access point, how you use that access point is your choice and what to make of it. Sometimes you get lucky and you find like, best of friendships in fleeting moments. And sometimes, even after trying hard, you can't really make a simple connection work with someone who you really need to work with.
So I'll just add a little bit, Nilesh. Trying hard, I think, is the greatest problem. I always feel just don't try hard, let it happen.
Yeah.
Don't try hard to shell yourself, or don't try too hard to bond, because there is this current that will connect. You have to be open to receive an offer.
Yeah. Patience is the name of the game then. With that in mind, if I could come to you, Juhi, and say, like, this is the inside out view. Now, give us the outside in view. As an entrepreneur, if you're looking at people who are moving from a B school environment to real world, where, sometimes you don't have a choice. You have to try hard because, you have to forge a connection with your boss. If you don't get along with them because they're appointed to you, right? What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So, how would you navigate the situation, and what are the specific anxieties that people would come across when they're trying to pave this path for themselves?
Yeah. So I think I would like to answer this in like two boxes, right? I think one big challenge is the fact that they are going to be leaving this wonderful, wonderful campus, right, of MICA, this little nice bubble with its own plus and minuses, right? So now they are getting ready for the real world, right? And kickstarting their journeys, building their careers. It's a long term, we've spoken about being it marathon. So, one being the readiness of it, right? They have to be mentally prepared that yes, there's a big change that's coming in our life, right? Some of them will not give a thought about it and then they'll just jump in and, kickstart that journey. But I think it's very important to prepare yourself, that okay, there is a big change, big shift that's going to come into our lives. Right now 50% of it is uncertain, but 50% of it can be in a locus of control,
Mhm.
right? So what kind of space that we want to build? Some of the students are actually going to be living in metro cities away from their families, but they can still build their own space, right? And they will be earning decent money for sure, right? So what kind of communities that they want to kind of engage with, right? What are those, some of those joyful spaces that can actually be a change of, like a breath of fresh air for them? What kind of people that they want to have, right? So it's very important that what some of the areas which are actually in our locus of control can be prepared. We can prepare ourselves for that big change, right? Secondly, I would say that since the corporate world is new for them, right, and we all have heard that, specifically in India, it's a lot of hustle culture. Work life balance is not a very key component. It's of course catching up with the recent news that has been developed, with EI and other pieces also. But I do feel that there are some nuances and skills that need to be built, right? So a, of course, learning to, unplug from work once the work is done, because we are all hustle culture babies, right? I have taken so many years to, unwind that in my own life as an entrepreneur also, because work was everything for me. It's your passion project. It's building your own organization is like raising a child, right? So learning to unplug once the work ends is very important. Communication around negotiation, right? These are skills that can be built over time, because once you enter as somebody, transitioning from a student to an employee, we often tend to, especially in the Indian space, we tend to short sell ourselves, like you mentioned about inner critique, right? So we end up struggling with some of those things. So it's difficult to kind of put across what we actually deserve, right? And these are small small instances. You can be lucky to have a good manager who can be your mentor also, but those relationships are nurtured, right? And you might get unlucky also when your line manager is not so good, right? So how do you build some of those problem solving, negotiation, and, communication, drawing boundaries, of course keeping the corporate conduct also, because I know I've worked with a lot of young people, and I have absolutely thoroughly enjoyed that how clear they were to draw boundaries. It helped me to draw boundaries, right, and have that kind of work life balance. So some line managers are opening up to that kind of culture. That change is happening in the ecosystem. But I do feel communication, boundaries, negotiation, having that work life balance are some key skill sets that can be prepared, and that readiness, to enter the corporate world, and of course not end up being in that spiral all the time. Oh, this person is going this way, this person is going in this career forward journey. But also understand the systems, give it time, give yourselves 3 months, 6 months to transition. It doesn't happen in a month's time. Be less harsh to yourself, be kinder to yourself, right? To and give yourself that time. It takes time to adjust to a new ecosystem, new workplace. Don't expect outcomes ASAP, right? Give it time. So yeah, these two boxes I wanted to talk about.
Amazing. I guess we are quite on theme in terms of what is the view inside out and what's the view outside. And now let's just be a bit more free flowing discussion around the specific topics of um, managing your expectations, right? And what I heard from you is what you're willing to put out there is will come to you. It may not come to you in the time you expect it to come. So you have to be patient, give it time for it to sort of take form and let it be what it wants to be for you, because you can only control as much as you have in your control. So, if I were to look at those two themes and explore these options a bit more, uh, would you like to take over, Juhi, at this point and sort of
Yeah.
walk us through what would be the best way to sort of, prioritize ourselves when we transition from any point of our milestone to another milestone? It's a new beginning for us, right? So, what is it that we can do to sort of prioritize our thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to take about some 20-21 minutes. I want everybody to tune in to this process. We are going to, indulge in a process where it will be reflective. It will be an activity around decluttering, right? Because there's always so much noise in our heads, and it's about, like, talking, conversations, and World Mental Health Day is also around there. So is Let's Talk Day. So I want everybody to take a piece of paper and pen, right? And I'm going to be sharing my screen. So just tune yourself, be in this process for the next 20 minutes. I would appreciate engagement. Nilesh is going to be supporting us in, in that process as well. So I will start and share my screen. Nilesh, just let me know, give me a heads up if it's all good.
Absolutely. You're watching and your screen's up.
All right. So this I've curated an experiential activity which will help you declutter, focus towards more about habit building. Also understand that prioritizing yourself is an everyday activity, right? So it's your well-being is your responsibility, right? So we'll get into this. So, some of the common challenges we all struggle with. I just wanted you to pick one. Do you relate a lot with one, or you relate a lot with two? Nilesh, you can help me what answers people are giving. And please do engage everyone. So, do you relate with imposter syndrome, or you relate with growth mindset? I am somewhere down the line moving from one to two, and I'm building some of those skill sets, which is helping me to move from one to two.
You're not alone, Juhi. There are a couple of responses coming in that suggest that people do feel that imposter syndrome where they start self-doubting.
Yeah, so we all go through that. What about this one? So, while we are talking about entering the corporate space, our expectation, all thanks to LinkedIn and social media, is image number one. But the reality is very different because nobody ends up sharing about their struggles, their challenges, their low points. So, this is a bit of a reality check here also, that it might look very different from the outside. It's very different in real. So it's very important for all of us to also be realistic and make sure that we are able to ride the wave, embracing all the ups and downs that come and become a part of our journey, right? I also wanted to bring these three elements. I think as a social entrepreneur, also something that we ended up coaching a lot of young individuals were around three aspects. Right now, discipline is boring, but it's definitely greater than the burden of regret. Anything that you want to achieve in terms of your dreams, in terms of a specific role, a target job, a certain package, it's a process, right? That process involves a lot of discipline, which we as individuals, all of us struggle with. But keep coming back to that aspect of how can I discipline myself a lot more. Another thing that I wanted to bring spotlight on was deep work. So once we start working, especially as marketing individuals or branding experts, our days look very different. And something that I also faced while working as a consultant or as an employee or as an entrepreneur is the importance of deep work. So some of us or some of you can experience that challenge, but I've been in this process of habit building and I've been experiencing the outcome of it. And there's so much incredible research available out there talking about the importance of deep work. So that is something that I wanted to share, that do not miss out on that. 2 hours of deep work will also help so much going in the long way. Thirdly, I wanted to talk about how we end up being so critical about how we show up, how we end up being disciplined on everyday basis. So if you look at, say, for example, fitness influencers, right? They showcase as if they're showing up every day, but that doesn't happen in reality. So social media, LinkedIn tends to distort our reality. What's important is that we end up showing every day in certain percentage and capacity, and not like full 100%. That doesn't happen in reality. So these three takeaways in terms of how do you build your life, which has all elements, right? A bit of family, a bit of friends, social circle, work, health, food, play, all of it, right? So how many of you kind of struggle with overthinking? Is there anybody who struggles with overthinking or constant brain fog? You know, I mean, you can drop in the chat box. And Nilesh, could you just help read out that just in case if anybody responds?
Sure. We this absolutely. But let's just give them a couple of minutes to react to this one. But there is a question which is related to the previous slide, and I
Sure.
have one as well specifically to put to you. You did emphasize deep work. It doesn't say that you have to focus, which is work without interruption. But can you give us example of what would you do if you were to sort of carve out portions of your day to do deep work? What does that mean?
So I follow the Pomodoro technique. So 50 minutes of deep work without any social media interruption. I keep my phone away. I make sure there are no open ended chats. I declutter my table and I take a 10-minute pause, and then I again resume for a 50-minute slot of deep work. Your entire day cannot be filled with deep work. So you have to allocate slots to put that in your calendar, because you also end up doing a lot of other stuff which is around, say, emailing or coordination or stepping out for a meeting. So as a practice, especially this year, my focus has been to strengthen my deep work hours. So for example, I try to do it before 12 o'clock. So I try and do, say, a slot of 7 to 9 or a 10 to 12, and then I just feel a lot more relaxed, because then my mind is like at a good space that, okay, I've done some quality deep work, and I make sure, and I also identify the activities which actually need deep work. So that, Nilesh,
If I
hope
could
that
just expand on
clarifies.
that example and ask
Yeah.
you to validate if what I consider an example of deep work is actually deep work according to your Pomodoro principle. So I am lifting this off of Madman. It's just something that stuck with me back in the day because a lot of us do a lot of knowledge jobs these days. So we do a lot of thinking, problem solving for someone else. These are not our problems, but we are solving problems, right? And sometimes you have that little sticky thing that it's a sticky problem. No matter what you do, it just keeps multiplying or it never really resolves. So you have to keep over solving every problem, and it can become a bit of an intrusive technique of doing things. Perfectionism can become, easy
Yeah.
output of it. So here's what I think it helps me do this. It's like, do some deep thinking about that problem, all no holds barred, like just anything. It could be a solution. Think, and then just take, like 5 minutes off, 10 minutes off, go for a walk. The solution will
Yeah.
automatically come to you. Would that be considered an example of deep of focused work?
I also feel it's very individualistic, right? What you're sharing with me is something which is a part of your process, right?
Sure.
So, yeah. So, I think it also depends on the kind of problem that you're sitting with or you're solving for,
Mhm.
right? If you think it's also an intuitive process, right? Like you mentioned about perfectionism. I do feel like some some task or problems need that kind of time, right? And some don't. So I think it's the intuitive process of also actually moving towards decision making, which I think will come through, right? So deep work can be applied to graphic design also. It can be applied to, say, L&D. It can apply to coaching work. It can apply for a proposal preparation. It can apply for many things, like for a job application also. So it's so important to prioritize and understand your own needs, and this is where I need deep work hours. So I think that's how I would want to go about it.
Amazing, thank you. Ruchi, yes.
So, Juhi, I'm almost speaking as a representative of the students right now, and I'm talking of the kind of work that they engage in.
Yeah.
And maybe this will, even if there aren't too many questions, a lot of work that management school students do entail being involved in social media and being online. Right. So when you're saying keep the phone away, but the nature of the work is such that I got to get search websites, look at their company's social medias, look at XYZ platforms. And in that might I come across something which is very interesting. Right. And I'm not saying that it's just a waste of time, but it's just that's happened current. And I know that tomorrow when I get into my economics class, this is going to help me. But today I'm doing my assignment for strategic communication, which requires deep work
Yeah.
because it's very analytical, it's very abstract. So I'm discussing in a group. I have gone to let me give you a live example. I'm using Mahindra as a case.
Yeah.
They go to Mahindra's X.
Yeah.
And that's when they're reading about EV vehicles and they get to read about Tesla. And
Yeah.
that takes them to Elon Musk. And Elon Musk's mother was a very successful lady because three children and all three doing so well. And then by the end of the 10th minute, this youngster who sat across saying deep work, all determined, goals are written out, is also on the path, but here is where he or she's gone. What do they do? I mean, how do they grapple with this? Because, and I will repeat and put it in a crisp line, disconnecting the technology from the output is almost impossible for these youngsters.
Okay. So what we can also, Ruchi, just a question. Do they like when does their day start?
Hmm. Typically, when there's first session, so if first session is morning 8 o'clock, it can start at 8. But, and let me be fair to the students, there's a possibility that this student could have attended a session 12 to 2 at night,
Hmm.
right? And then I can come back with that student next morning 6 o'clock. For me, it's one off, but for this student, there are series of activities after that. So
Or
I expect that person to be in my class 2 o'clock at night, 6 o'clock in the morning, because then I can unplug and do my things. But that student has then an economics and a quant and a research and an analytics and a case com
yeah.
and family coming
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. So I will like to again answer in like a two-step process. So A, like there are days where I know I have multiple say emails to write and I have a lot of coordination work. So it's like a spillover, right? So even that becomes a kind of struggle because so you could also look at like blocking 50 minutes to do some of that aspects, right? Where you have to engage, coordinate, and get like make a checklist and just get done with all of that, say in 50 minutes, right? When it comes to, yes, I'm understanding the challenges around, taking out time around deep work, and I feel these are very practical challenges, but I also feel time can be taken out, right? That's how you design your day. I mean, there are so many things that each student has to offer, multiple activities, multiple, different streams of practices that are happening. So I do feel like, and I've seen some of my colleagues also who've been in B school, like they would, of course, be burning the midnight oil, but make sure that, they take out time, go to the library, switch off their phones, and they do end up investing in that kind of deep work. But it also depends on like what are some of the aspects that students are trying to build, what is that they want to focus on, what they want to ace, and figure out that kind of deep work. Also, I think if I follow the Pomodoro technique where it is 50 minutes, it could also be slots of 20 minutes, Ruchi, right? So, how 20 minutes of deep work, or say it could be 30 minutes, 40 minutes, as per the viability that's working for students. And I'm also sharing about deep work not just from a B school perspective, also outside of your career, right? It's a practice that I think it's a skill that should be built looking at a long term career journey as well. I hope this kind of answers your query.
It does. It does. Amazing examples set out there, both by yourself, Ruchi and Juhi. Thank you for answering. So, to paraphrase it, if you were to say that it is a ritual in a day, you can
Yeah.
organize it based on your preference or the task at hand.
Yeah.
Deep work can easily be equated to something that requires focus that is void of distractions. It helps you get
Yeah.
things done. So you feel a bit accomplished at the end of that. So you feel
Yeah.
like you've done something meaningful and therefore you've achieved something. So great. And, demands of different challenges can be different for different people, but that does put things into perspective. So, Juhi, do you want to continue with your presentation? Thank you for
Yeah.
taking the question there.
Yeah. So, were you able to receive any responses, or else I'll go ahead?
We just recap this bit a bit more because we did sort of go back. So,
Mm.
the
Oh,
question here was to figure out, where do we spend our time? Do we think of the past, think of the future, or are we focusing on present? Is that the question you had?
yeah, I basically wanted to ask everybody that how many of you kind of struggle with, having one part of the brain in the past and one part of in the future. I think most of us do. I think I have my days when I also struggle with this. I'm sure Nilesh also does, so does Ruchi. So one of our biggest challenges, in navigating our own mental health journey is to being in the present,
Yeah.
right? So it is one of the most fundamental difficult challenges when it comes to mental health, right? So what we are going to do now in the next part of this activity is to declutter, not be in our heads. And from what I have been able to gauge is that yes, it is difficult and challenging to take out that time, so we end up spending a lot of time in our heads and not end up writing it. So take this as a decluttering exercise. I'm going to do a quick run through in terms of guiding you about this process. We'll be sharing this deck with all of you. Take out some time tomorrow or over the weekend and spend time to defining these aspects for yourselves while being in the campus or also transitioning outside the campus, right? So the first is goal setting, right? And I'm sure everybody has entered MICA with their dream organization package or location for that matter. Document that, right? What habits you want to build around your physical health, your mental health, self study within the campus setting, or even outside if you want to kind of take some of these cues to design your life after MICA, right? What big changes are you anticipating when you exit MICA? This we discussed in the like 15 minutes before. So it's very important that what are some of the changes that you're anticipating, do not be in your heads, document it, think it through. It's very important, right? Who are these people? Because your people around you are also going to be changing. So right, so corporate life, how do you like to unwind and manage stress, physical, mental, at a spiritual level as well, right? So this is again, I'm sharing that you can document whatever is coming up on your mind. Go in an in-depth reflection process. Keep this as a ready exercise so that you can build on this further. I wanted to introduce day segmentation, right? So how can you actually maximize your day, be it a weekday or a weekend, right? Inside the campus, outside the campus. It's so this is a practice, right? You can divide your day into six segments, right? So say starting segment one from 6 to 9, S2, segment 2, 9 to 12 p.m. Then there is segment 5 and 6 as well, right? So there are about six segments in your day. All of us have 24 hours, right? Including Ruchi, including Nilesh, and we all have tasks to achieve, we have goals to pursue. So it's very important that you end up utilizing and seeing your day in segments and incorporate aspects of physical fitness also, so that you're able to recharge yourself, right? And make sure that all the emotions that you go through the day, right, and all the thoughts, there's a process to kind of get it away from your body as well, right? And like Ruchi mentioned, there are classes, there is case com, there is interview prep. So this activity can actually help you better manage your time, right, and build, incorporate healthy habits as well. So first is identifying your distractions, right? So who, it's very important. Like I was hearing Nikhil Kamath, right? One founder of Zerodha, that he actually made a list of people who end up doing a lot of drama in his life, and he decided to be away from it, right? So I'm not going to exactly put that as an example, but I think it's very, very important to learn to say no to things, to activities, to a lot of things in our life to be able to have razor sharp focus, right? We won't be able to achieve this, say, about 100%, but we can try and achieve this about 60 to 70% and strive to increase that percentage in life. So it's very important to identify who are the people who you feel, and I'm sure this happens in campus because there are just a lot of you, who are the people who actually end up eating up your time, right? And who are the people who are actually good for you. So that is something you can list it down. Campus, multiple things are happening. There's FOMO that is kicking in, but the reality is that you can't do everything. It's very important to prioritize that. So, what are some of the distractions at a campus level? Right, some of you might also be unfortunately struggling with responsibilities at home also, right? So what is that you need to kind of say no to, draw healthy boundaries so that you can take out time for yourself, not exhaust and burn out in the campus. And of course, what are some of the futuristic things, right, that you think is at this moment, at your time and journey, at this period of time in MICA, is acting as a distractor, right? Second aspect is going to be, as we spoke about, readiness, life outside MICA. So what does your social life look like, right? What are some of the things that you would want to be an aspect of your social life? Few folks from college, few folks from school, any kind of community, say a weekend or fitness community that you would want to be a part of, or an art space that you would want to be a part of to keep your mental health sane and have that kind of work life balance. Secondly, family. Yeah, here you, all of you have struggled to prioritize your family, and when you go back to the corporate world, it will become a priority for some it won't. Some of you will be living within you with your family, some of you are going to be living away from family. So how are you going to take out time? What kind of activities you would want to engage with your family? Thirdly, it's work, right? What are some of the things that you need to prep for? It's going to be a very different routine, right? So is there any upskilling that you want to do? You want to take out some time over a certain, on everyday basis, or say a weekend, to prep yourself better to be able to shine at work? And what are some of the things that you feel are, say, some pit stops and gaps that you would want to work on? And home, if you are living outside of your immediate family, it's very important to build a nice healthy space for yourself. Do you need bigger rooms? You need a smaller space? Are you going to be minimalistic? What your safe space is going to be look like is very, very important, right? So these four cues can help you prep for the readiness and transition out of MICA. Self care. You are your own superhero, so make sure to take care of yourself. Physical health is very, very important when we are talking about mental health. Mental health is a very holistic process. It's not just about either therapy, or it's not just about mindfulness, right? It's not about it's a lot of things, right? It's a full circle, right? So physical health is very, very important when we are talking about mental health also, and mental health is the foundation to a healthy life, good relationships, right, and a great career. So what is that key activity that you would want to take up, or you want to do right now at campus also, to take care of your physical health? What are you doing for your mental health? Are you journaling? Are you practicing mindfulness? Are you taking therapy? Ruchi mentioned not most of you are going to a counselor or talking to a friend. It's so important to initiate some of those conversations around mental health, about how you're feeling. If you're overwhelmed, are you documenting that? And it could be many other practices in mental health also. Unwinding is very, very important, right? And you have multiple options, but when you are engaging in a particular specific activity at MICA, there are, I'm sure, 100% that there are multiple activities around unwinding also. So in your head, make it a point that you are, hey, I'm engaging in this, drawing this graffiti on the wall, I am unwinding, I'm taking some time for a walk, reading a book, I am unwinding. So make sure that you're wiring yourself also that, hey, even with so many options, so much, so many things happening constantly, chaos, I'm still taking out time to unwind myself, right? Another practice that I would really like kind of recommend is identifying people in your life, because from here on, you've built relationships, you've interacted with your seniors, alums, and you will be starting a journey to build some long lasting relationships. And it's very, very important that you do that. So, who are these people who make you feel safe, make you feel heard, and you can trust? So, you can actually identify key people, because you can't build that with an entire village. It will always be few key people. So, make sure that you identify them, who are your safe space, who have a positive impact on your mental health, right? To keep them close and nurture those relationships for a long journey ahead in your career, or as well as in your personal life, right? And lastly, I would want to just remind everybody to be gentle, to be kinder, and be your own safe space in this journey of building your own career, um, taking care of yourself, and building your own mental health. So, yeah, that's about it, Nilesh.
This is amazing. Thank you for sharing these tips. We'll get Ruchi to tune in and say, like, what are your reflections? Do you have any comments to add to what Juhi just presented, or something that resonated with you and you would like to sort of expand on?
Oh, lovely. I mean, what I thought as I was hearing Juhi was that I wish a few of my students just take a part of it, and then we can see the kind of change. But the counter thought in my head was also this, that if Juhi, a lot of youngsters, and I'm talking of college students, begin to take this as work, probably they'll only add to their stress to say, oh, I missed out on doing this. So, the purpose for which they're doing this, they need to keep reminding themselves constantly. Because while we know that the youngsters are playful, I also know that a lot of them are very highly aspirational, to the extent of becoming getting tough on themselves. So I could have a group of a youngster in a class who's not going to do the basic necessary mandatory reads, and there could be another one whom I've given a reference read and said, it's a good idea if you go through it. He or she would have gone through that also. So I was listening to all of this from that committed, that serious youngster who's actually the persona of the one who's trying to be in the top five, is aiming at a specific company, has gone through the websites, and I'm giving you real cases. And right now it's happening about in all campuses because summer placements are happening. You've gone through the company's website, you've cracked the case, you're there, and then you can't make it through the placement process. And that's when all of this really catapults and compounds extensively. Like the demons just grow very strong. The apprehension and loss of faith is very high, because you seem to have done everything which is recommended and good. And it happens to a couple of my students. For example, they'll come and tell me, ma'am, this is it, and this is how I'll answer. Do you think it's a good idea? And I've helped them shape it. But it's human dynamics, and that person who's interviewing you, or that person who's coming with a job offer, I don't know what he or she has in the head, what are their pressures basis which they're making a choice. So I would request Juhi, if you could also talk a little about handling failures. And
Yeah.
I'm using the word failure as disappointments only, which seem to be life wrecking for many. But
Yeah.
like we mentioned, and I'm also kind of plugging this back to all of it being a marathon and not a sprint.
Yeah.
If you could get that to talk with what you said, I think it makes a
Yeah.
lot
I
of
think,
logic.
yeah, I think I've had my own share of, super duper rejections where I've put in my all my 100%, right? There's nothing that I've not done or, tick mark, which is
Yeah.
in my locus of control, and then yet things don't work in our direction. And it happens with all of us.
Yes.
So none of us are spared. So I think it's a fundamental fact that it will happen at some point in time. So I think a acceptance of that. And secondly, I think all of us are, like I mentioned in the initial start, that we are all are unique. We all have our own process of processing this setback or regulating ourselves. But I think the most fundamental aspect is to becoming aware, right? For me, a rejection is a redirection. I take it in that spirit. So I very feel, I don't know if you are aware about this concept of neuroplasticity, right?
Yes.
So I take it as a very input output. So what I feed in my mind, right, is what I'm going to, how I'm going to feel. So we will go through that phase where we'll feel deeply sad. It's okay to be sad, right? For like, for me in my initial years when I was a part of an institution, it would take me like, I would be like this a real soap opera queen, right? It would take me 2 months to recover from that, right? So now as I've grown up, I'm 12 and a half, 13 years into my career, you are going to be having a more mature response to something like this. So I think navigating life between reaction and responding, figuring out your own process of how you're actually going to process setback, right? And it's okay to kind of give importance to that kind of emotion, feel it, it's fine. Because if you won't feel it, it will bottle it up, and then it is going to become much more ugly. That's where a therapy session comes handy, right? That's where safe spaces come handy. So I think, like, for me, like I mentioned, it's a redirection for me. So I take, earlier I would take a lot more time to bounce back. Now I take a lot shorter because I've grown and worked on that kind of mindset. So I would say, embrace that journey. If you're feeling devastated, it's okay, feel that way, right? But since currently the requirement, I'm going to say, in the campus my context, you got to get up fast, right? So you need to kind of learn it to kind of process, or okay, these are some of the things, journal, write it down so that you're documenting, right? And just make sure what is helping you at that time to feel better, right? It could be eating a tub of ice cream also, we all have done that, right? Because for some people it's food that helps them feel calm. For some people it's talking, it's sharing. For some people it's completely shutting down, being in silence, right? So I think figure out your own process. It's going to happen at MICA, it's going to happen after MICA, it's going to happen 10 years in your career, it's always going to happen. So that's a fundamental fact. In hindsight, the answer, the solution is to build your own process to navigate that emotional ride, right? And it's mindset work, right? So figure out what works for you, right? And that's how I think I'll keep continuing. I will stop. Nilesh, over to you.
No, I was just reflecting on everything that you were saying because it happens a lot when someone else is talking. Those light bulbs just go in your head, right? And you're like, oh, this is a great idea. And oh my God, this is so relevant. You're literally reading my mind and sort of answering my questions. I'm going to
Yeah.
reflect on it as a person who's listening to both of you speak. And, we were talking about what's Let's Talk. It's an employer branding initiative, right? Specifically saying that people need to find ways to decompress. People need to find ways to sort of reflect on what they're going through and not necessarily just shrug everything under the carpet, right? So it's more about finding connections through conversations. So if you think you're struggling with something, there is always someone else who's also struggling with the same thing or has a different way of doing things, right? Um, I love this young analyst. His name is James Hollis. If you Google him, you will find a lot of his recent work. And because of that, he's done a couple of podcasts. And these tidbits come from there. It's a Jungian psychology which says, rejection is protection. Sometimes it says, the door that you think that you are going to open, but it never opened for you. Um, uh, no matter how much you think there was a path behind it, that door was nothing. It was just a wall. There is nothing behind that door. It just means you tried. So in the morning, if you run for a bus, say your prayer, I hope I make it to the bus stop and I get the bus, and you run for it. You get there, you get the bus, it was your bus. And If you run for it, say a prayer for it, but you get there and you don't get it, it was not your bus, right? So those are the modern reflections we hear from different people and different avatars. Based on that, it was a very lovely conversation today. We have reached the end of our 60-minute thing. Of course, if you just avoid the first minute blunder that we had with technology, and I'm glad it did not recur. So this was a very, very lovely evening chatting to both of you. And through the means of Let's Talk initiative, we were able to come together today. So tomorrow is 10th of October, and we are now sort of gathering around it and saying, like, let's make this a bit of an initiative to say, let's talk, or rather have those conversations or talk about these conversations outside of our network. With that, 30 seconds each, passing thoughts.
I think the more you think about it, the more it dawns on how important it is and how easy it is. But my last bit, I will get back from what I always stand on is it's about what you do every minute, which adds to a day, which adds to a week, and then a month. So, very often, don't let it accumulate as a month and then feel overwhelming to say it can't be managed. If it has to be done today or now, handle it. Good, bad, ugly, do it now. You're going to be better off in the next minute than you are not doing it today. So, procrastination, Hamlet suffered. Don't become the Hamlet too.
Very, very good point. Juhi?
I would say prioritize yourself, right? I think it's going to be all fine, right? You will be fine. You'll be able to ride the wave. It might look very difficult, very challenging right now. You are in a very uncertain zone what the future holds for you, but all of us eventually end up surviving, right? Focus on some of the skill sets that are like deeply, deeply critical for your own journey so that your unbound potential can unfold, right? So, and keep continuing the conversations, right, about how you're feeling, how you need support, how you can access support. So let that conversation continue. So yeah.
And a passing thought from me is, every time I'm troubled with something or something that, starts sort of, niggling and invasive thoughts that keep coming back to you, I let them be there. And if those thoughts just keep recurring, that's when I say, like, oh, I need to really talk to someone about this to get reflection, because not everything that comes to my brain is a brilliant idea or a brilliant idea to worry about. So I have learned this little Socratic method of, like, asking myself questions. Is this really important? If not, just carry on. If it is important, it will just come back to me tomorrow, because I'm a worrier. And if I worry about everything that I think about, I will have a lot to worry. So that was me saying that, in theme of our today's conversation, I hope we were able to sort of discuss points that are top up in front, like, for the students at MICA and who are attending today. But for being such a great audience and engaging with us in conversation, I really appreciate the evening spent today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Nilesh. Thank you, Ruchi.
Good
Thank
night.
you,
Thank you, and the pleasure was equally mine. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Yeah.